The sun was sinking low, its dying light spilling across the dusty plains like a wash of fire. The cicadas had begun their evening song, a high, restless buzz that seemed to echo the tension hanging thick in the air. At the edge of a half-broken corral, a woman sat bound. Her arms were stretched cruelly behind the fence post, her ankles tied wide apart with coarse rope. She wore what had once been a fine white dress, now torn at the seams and streaked with dust and dried blood. Her face was streaked too, not with vanity's paint, but with grit and the stubbornness of survival. Her name was Eleanor Kane, daughter of a man most folks in Mason County cursed when they spat. And now she was paying his debts with her own flesh. A horse stamped nearby, tossing its head at the smell of fear. Its rider stood a few paces away. He was a tall man, shoulders bent beneath the years and the burdens of a land that took more than it gave. His hat was drawn low, shadowing a face lined by the sun, the wind, and memories he couldn't shake. Caleb Whitlock, rancher, widower, a man too familiar with the grave silence of the West. His revolver hung heavy at his side, the steel colder than the desert night to come. Eleanor lifted her chin, her voice cracked but steady. "Please," she whispered. "I beg you, just make it quick." Caleb froze, his weathered hand twitching near the gun that could grant her wish. Around them, the outlaws waited, 5 men in dust-stained coats, leaning against the fence, grinning through broken teeth and yellow tobacco stains. Their leader, Barrett Cole, stood just behind them, a wolf of a man with eyes as sharp as flint. "You've heard the lady, Whitlock," Cole drawled. "No need to drag it out. End her, and you're free of your debt." Free. Caleb let the word hang in his mind. Free of the debt that had chained him to Cole's gang these past 2 years. Free of the long days working for men he despised, and the longer nights knowing he'd bartered away his own pride to keep his ranch alive. But as he looked at Eleanor, her wrists raw from rope, her spirit unbroken despite the cruelty, another memory stirred. One he had buried deep. The memory of his wife, Anna, kneeling in the dust, her face pale, her dress torn, before the raiders dragged her from their cabin that night. He hadn't been fast enough. He hadn't been strong enough. And when the smoke cleared, Anna was gone, swallowed by the same kind of men who now smirked at his hesitation. His hand faltered on the grip of his Colt. Sweat stung his eyes. Eleanor spoke again, softer now, her gaze steady on his. "If you're going to do it with mercy. Don't let them have their fun." The words struck him like a lash. Caleb Whitlock, rancher of Lone Mesa, stood between his own survival and the last chance to reclaim the man he once was. Barrett Cole spat into the dust and leaned on the corral rail, his boots caked with the blood of a dozen towns he'd burned. "Well? We don't got all day. You want your ranch, Whitlock? You want your debts cleared? Put a bullet in her skull." The other outlaws chuckled, shifting their rifles, eager for sport. Caleb stood frozen, the revolver like a brand against his thigh. He could hear the wind whistling through the broken boards of the fence, and with it came the ghosts of the past. It was spring when Anna had come west with him, leaving behind her father's farm in Missouri. Caleb had promised her a life of freedom, a cabin in the hills, a chance to build something with their own hands. He remembered her laughter the day they dug their first well, the way she'd brushed her hair back, sweaty and proud, and said, "This land's got our names on it now." But it hadn't been enough. Not when the drought hit. Not when the raiders came, painted in dust and whiskey, howling like devils. Caleb had fought. Lord, he had fought. But Anna had been taken, and her body never found. After that, the ranch became nothing but work and silence. And when the bank came calling, Caleb had been desperate enough to turn to Barrett Cole. A mistake that chained him here, staring down another woman's suffering. Eleanor spoke again, her voice steadier now, with a kind of weary dignity. "My father, he made enemies. I know that. He cheated men, ruined families. But I am not him. If you kill me, Mr. Whitlock, you'll be no better than the men holding those ropes." One of the outlaws snorted. "Listen to her. Preachin' sermons like she's in a church pew." Eleanor turned her head sharply. "And you, laughing while another's life hangs in the balance. Does it make you feel big? Like a man? The outlaw spat, muttered a curse, but Caleb saw something flicker in the others. A sliver of unease. Even among wolves, conscience had a way of gnawing. Barrett Cole stepped forward, breaking the silence. His voice was cold iron. Enough talk. Whitlock, you shoot her or I will. But if I do, the deal's off, and your ranch goes up in smoke by sundown. Caleb's chest tightened. The ranch, his father's land, and his dream, all he had left. Without it, he was nothing but dust on the wind. He raised the revolver slowly. His finger brushed the trigger. Eleanor met his gaze, unflinching. And in that moment, Caleb saw not a banker's daughter, not a burden, but a soul refusing to be broken, just as Anna had once refused. The weight of choice pressed down harder than the desert sky. Would he damn himself again for survival? Or stand against the devils who had chained him, even if it meant losing everything? Instead of pulling the trigger, he let the revolver fall. The gun thudded into the dirt. Gasps broke from the gang. Cole's smile vanished. Caleb moved fast. His hunting knife flashed from his belt, cutting the rope at Eleanor's wrists. "Get down!" he growled. The first outlaw reached for his rifle, but Caleb spun, driving the knife into the man's gut. The outlaw howled, stumbled back, and the corral erupted into chaos. Eleanor dropped to the ground, dragging her raw wrists free, even as another bandit lunged. She snatched up the revolver Caleb had dropped, and, though her hands shook, fired. The shot went wide, but it startled the man long enough for Caleb to wrench the rifle from his hands and crack it across his jaw. Gunfire exploded. The horses screamed, rearing in panic. Dust rose thick, blotting the twilight with smoke and blood. Caleb ducked behind the fence post, firing back at shadows darting through the haze. One outlaw fell, clutching his chest. Another stumbled, a bullet tearing through his shoulder. Eleanor crawled low, dragging her bound legs toward the broken lantern left on a wagon. She grabbed it, her mind racing. When an outlaw closed in, grinning at her helplessness, she hurled the lantern into the dry straw at his feet. Flame roared to life, forcing him back as the fire licked across the corral. "Good girl!" Caleb barked, squeezing off another shot. But Barrett Cole had yet to move. He stood tall in the growing smoke, his revolver drawn, his eyes locked on Caleb. Calm. Patient. When the dust cleared, only 3 men were left standing: Caleb, Eleanor, and Cole. The others lay dead or bleeding, the fire's glow painting their bodies red. Cole tipped his hat back, smiling thin and cruel. "I knew it, Whitlock. You ain't got the stomach for survival. Always thought you were weak." Caleb's chest heaved, smoke burning his lungs. "Maybe I was," he said hoarsely. "But not anymore." Cole cocked his revolver. "Then let's finish this the right way." The fire crackled in the corral, painting the scene in gold and shadow. Only 2 figures stood now, Caleb Whitlock and Barrett Cole. The outlaw leader's boots crunched in the dirt as he stepped forward, slow and deliberate. His revolver gleamed in the firelight, already cocked. His eyes held no rush, no fear, just the cold amusement of a predator toying with its prey. Eleanor pressed herself against the corral post, clutching the dropped rifle though her hands still trembled. She knew enough of men like Cole to see it. This wasn't just a fight for land, or debt, or survival. It was pride. It was power. It was blood. "You could have had your ranch back, Whitlock," Cole said. "You could have lived quiet, fattened cattle, drank yourself stupid till the day you dropped. Instead, you throw it all away for some banker's girl?" Caleb steadied his stance, revolver raised chest high. His hand was scarred, callous from years of rope and shovel, but it didn't shake. "Wasn't for her," he said. "It was for me." Cole smirked. "Then I'll carve that lesson into your bones." The 2 men circled each other in the dust, boots scraping, the firelight flickering across their faces. The world seemed to narrow to the space between them. No sound now but the hiss of flame and the low groan of horses in the distance. Eleanor held her breath. Cole struck first. A flash of steel, a thunderclap. Caleb dropped low, the bullet whistling past his ear. He fired back, the recoil slamming his arm, and saw Cole stumble as the shot grazed his shoulder. But the outlaw didn't fall, he only grinned wider, teeth gleaming red in the firelight. Better than I thought, Cole growled, advancing. He fired again, the bullet splintering the fence inches from Caleb's head. Caleb rolled, his knee screaming as it hit the ground, but his next shot drove Cole back a step. Dust swirled between them, every heartbeat louder than a drum. For a heartbeat, the world went still. Caleb's mind dragged him back to Anna's face in the firelight that night so many years ago. Her eyes had begged him, pleaded for him to act before it was too late. He hadn't. And he'd lived with that weight ever since. Not this time. He rose, slow and steady, revolver aimed dead center. Cole laughed, low and cruel. You think you're some kind of hero, Whitlock? This land eats heroes alive. Caleb's voice was gravel. Maybe. But it don't forget cowards either. The last shots rang out like judgment. Cole staggered. For a moment, it seemed impossible that the wolf could bleed. But crimson bloomed across his chest, spreading through his dusty coat. He dropped to one knee, eyes wide with fury that curdled into disbelief. He tried to raise his gun again, but his strength was gone. The revolver slipped from his hand, clattering into the dirt. Barrett Cole toppled forward, his face striking the dust with a dull thud. The outlaw king was no more. Caleb stood over him, chest heaving, smoke rising from the barrel of his revolver. His legs trembled, blood soaking through a graze on his arm, but he didn't falter. Not this time. Eleanor rushed to him, her small hands catching his sleeve. You're hurt, sit please. Caleb shook his head, lowering the gun at last. Later. First we get out of here. Around them, the fire crackled higher, threatening to consume the corral. The night was alive with the smell of death and smoke, but for the first time in years, Caleb felt the weight of his soul lift. He had faced the devil, and he had not bowed. By dawn, the fire had burned itself out. The outlaws' bodies were left for the buzzards, and the prairie was still again. Caleb saddled his horse, his movements heavy, every muscle aching with the price of survival. Eleanor stood nearby, clutching a borrowed blanket around her shoulders. The horizon stretched wide before them, endless and untamed. Where will you go? Caleb asked, tightening the cinch. She looked eastward, toward the towns and railroads, toward the banks and ledgers that had defined her life. Then she turned back to the open mesas, the sky painted in soft strokes of gold. I don't know, she admitted. But I know I can't go back. Not to the name, not to the life my father left behind. Caleb gave a slow nod. The West's got a way of making you start fresh. Or burying you, if you don't fight hard enough. She smiled faintly, tired but unbroken. Then maybe we both start fresh. They rode together that morning, side by side across the wide plains. The land stretched out in every direction, silent witness to their flight. The wind carried the smell of sage and smoke, the promise of both hardship and hope. Caleb glanced at Eleanor as the sun climbed higher. She held herself tall in the saddle, though her body bore the marks of cruelty. There was fire in her still, the kind of fire that could light a man's path if he had the courage to follow it. For the first time in years, Caleb felt something stir in him. Not just survival. Not just stubborn pride. But possibility. He thought of Anna again, her laughter, her promise that the land would carry their names. Perhaps that promise hadn't died with her. Perhaps it lived on in the courage to keep going, to protect, to love again. Eleanor caught his gaze and held it. No words passed between them, but none were needed. In that look was trust, gratitude, and the faintest glimmer of something neither of them dared name yet. By the time they reached the ridge, the sun had risen full, spilling its light over the mesas. The shadows of the night were gone, burned away by the day's first warmth. Caleb reined in his horse, staring at the land that stretched before them, wild, cruel, beautiful. The West did not forgive, did not forget. But it offered a man the chance to write his own ending. Eleanor drew up beside him, her voice soft. Where to now? Caleb tipped his hat against the glare, his answer as steady as the land itself. Wherever the trail leads. They rode on, two figures against the horizon, carrying with them a story born of blood, fire, and the courage to choose differently. And in the dust of the old frontier, their legend began, not of death, but of redemption, justice, and the kind of love that rises unexpected from the ashes of the past. And so ends this tale of dust, blood, and redemption, a story carved into the endless horizon of the Wild West. If this journey moved you, don't let it fade into the silence. Hit that like button, share it with fellow riders of the frontier, and subscribe so you'll never miss the next chapter in our growing collection of Wild West stories. Every legend we tell keeps the spirit of the frontier alive, the courage, the danger, the justice, and the love that once burned beneath these skies. Until we ride again, keep the fire of the West in your heart.